he's a lop-eared rabbit. So he's actually all black, and he's got 2 big floppy ears. He's very sweet. He was inspiration to create a new relief ink color with speedball that I've been working on.
Hello, print friends, and welcome to the 58th episode of Pine Copper Lime, the internet's #1 printmaking podcast. I'm your host, Miranda Metcalf. I release weekly podcasts with people in the print world doing something a bit beyond the expected. So please subscribe on your podcast listening app of choice. You can also find Pine Copper Lime on Instagram and Facebook, and you can sign up for our monthly newsletter with print news from around the world, all at pinecopperlime.com. We also have a Patreon page, where, if you like this show and you want to give $1 or $2 each month, it keeps our spirits high and the lights on. Printmaking forever, shun the non-believers. This episode of Pine Copper Lime is brought to you by our sponsor, Speedball Art Products, who've been bringing a diverse range of high-quality products to your creative practice since 1997. Their newest exciting initiative is Speedball's Print Posse. Working with contemporary printmaking icons, Speedball has invited each artist to design and name an ink of their choosing. Artists like Anna Hasseltine, whose relief Hoppin' Holland Blue is inspired by the classic white and blue colors on Delft pottery, and of course, her Holland Lop, whose name just happens to be blue. The shade itself is a classic deep blue, warmed by maybe the slightest hint of purple undertones. Shop at speedballart.com to find out where you can pick up a can of your new favorite ink. And my guest this week actually just happens to be Anna Hasseltine. We'll talk about animals in Anna's prints and the historical tradition of using flora and fauna as metaphor, working with some of the biggest presses in the US, from Brandex editions to Cannonball to HoofPrint, her collaboration with Speedball to create her own ink, and how her ceramic and printmaking practices influence each other. Oh, and of course, her rabbit blue. So, without further ado, sit back, relax, and prepare to hop to it with Anna Hasseltine. Hi, Anna. How's it going?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for joining me.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on your podcast.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to learning more about you and your work. I've definitely just kind of seen you around on the internet, making beautiful work in printmaking, but also ceramics as well. So I'm kind of excited to talk about that crossover. Yeah, but before we kind of get into all the meat and potatoes, can you please let people know who you are and where you are and what you do?
Yeah, totally. So my name is Anna Hasseltine, and I was born in Boston, Massachusetts, and that's where I grew up pretty much till I was 18. And then I applied and went to Pratt Institute for college, and that's kind of where, and that's in New York City, and that's kind of where I got my start with really getting into printmaking and just deciding that this is what I wanted to do with my life. And I was there for 4 years, and afterwards, I ended up in Chicago, so that's where I currently am. I've been in Chicago for about 5 years. It'll be 5 years in December, and I'm working with a couple of print shops out here, as well as, making my own work and printmaking and ceramics, and so it's been good so far.
Yeah, excellent. So you were growing up in Boston. Were you someone who came from like an artistic family? Were you taken to museums? How did you end up going to art school or knowing that that's the path you wanted to be on?
Well, ever since I was super young, my mom was a stay-at-home mom, and she had actually gone to the University of New Hampshire as a painting major. So growing up, she would be painting, and she really got into pastels. And so I'd always see her making things, and she would always encourage my sister and I to we do all sorts of crafts and just making a mess all the time. And I feel like just like, yeah, like from a very young age, learning how to build things and make things using my hands and not being afraid to get messy, I that just stuck with me. And throughout, ever since I was young, elementary school, middle school, I think from the beginning, I knew I wanted to do something with art. I didn't know what field exactly I wanted to go into, but there was always something about the making and building and creating that just I'd never lost interest in it. And that's where I am now. And yeah, growing up nearby was the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston, which has, a great collection. It's also got a museum school. When I was younger, I would take classes at the museum school right next door, and they would take us over to the MFA, and we would get to, go to all the painting exhibits. And they also have a really, really large printmaking department there. And I remember just looking at all the woodcuts and engravings and etching. So I feel like I had a pretty solid background growing up, and it's just kind of inspired me to pursue that more in high school. And again, it was a great program at my high school, and I had a lot of encouragement from the teachers there, and they really pushed me and, made me realize that I could have a full-time career and a life making art, and I just kept going with it.
Yeah. So were you kind of aware of what prints and printmaking were before you went to college? And I sort of ask that because there's so many people that I chat with who say, they never even knew what printmaking was, or even that it was an option until they ended up, in that college studio. But it sounds like maybe you were exposed to that ahead of time.
Yeah. So, in high school, I feel like a lot of people have, lino cut. That was kind of the most accessible printmaking medium, I feel like, for a lot of middle school, high school art classes. And so that's really my first introduction into it. So I had known probably ninth or 10th grade, we started doing little with the easy cut from speedball, making little lino cut prints. And then I remember one summer, again, I'd been taking a lot of art classes and summer camps, and there was this one school, it's called Lesley University, and it's called the Art Institute of Boston there, and they offered a printmaking class, and they had mentioned, we were going to be doing dry point and an introduction into screen printing. And so I had never done those. And by taking the class there, that was my first introduction. And I was actually able to bring back some of the things that I learned at the Art Institute of Boston into my senior year of high school, where I was kind of experimenting and exploring more with using wood carving tools more, and also doing my own kind of DIY screen printing, which was interesting. But I did kind of have a little bit of a handle on some of those processes before I got to Pratt, which is then I got into, etching and lithography and learning some more of the tricks of the trade, I guess, and like getting a much better understanding of how to actually make use of all the different materials and what printmaking could offer. So
yeah. And then I'm also always curious to know for people, particularly as you tell your story, you say that, you found printmaking and you came to just know that you're like, all right, this is it. This is what I'm going to do for my life. What do you think it was about printmaking that struck that chord with you, that really made you feel like, yeah, okay, this is what I'm doing moving forward from now on?
Well, I think that when I first got to art school, my first year, there was the foundation year, and they really encouraged, an exploration in everything. It was very strongly rooted in drawing and painting and sculpture. And so that first year, I was kind of learning more about those techniques, but I was finding that I was like needing something more process based. I always liked kind of that, step by step, being able to just follow wherever printmaking takes me next. And I wasn't getting necessarily that satisfaction out of just drawing and painting. And so just being able to really work with the process. I've always been a very process based, like love making lists, like following the list, crossing it off, all that kind of thing. And so I feel like for me, printmaking was able to, fill that desire that I had to, in some ways it's predictable, but in other ways it's totally unpredictable, and just kind of navigating that. I always found to be much more intriguing and interesting than I mean, I love drawing and painting, but again, the printmaking, for me, it was more exciting and more engaging. And that was something that I think I needed to keep my interest.
That's interesting because I've been thinking about how printmaking is quite process based, right? This is something that we often talk about when we talk about the medium. But I've never heard anyone really make that connection before to like a process based personality. And
Yeah.
it's really something that I actually do see quite a bit in other people, or even, for instance, my husband, who's the editor, he's a printmaker, he's a lithographer. As I've gotten to know him over the years, I've discovered that, yeah, we always say, like, he does good with direct directions. He's like, look, just tell me the things that need to be done. And then I'm in my comfort zone because I'm confident in my capabilities to do those things.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so, because it's sort of beyond even as an artistic practice, but even something, innate in people where if they're like, I like a list of steps, and I like knowing that there's going to be an outcome on the other side. So
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, I'm a list maker. I, love checking things off, and I've just always kind of been, I think at first I was more interested when I got into printmaking, definitely of the technical side of things. And I initially had thought that I wanted to pursue, only being a printer and printing for other people. But then I find that during after I graduated, I started traveling and seeing more of the world. And I realized that, I could print for people and also still be an artist. And and I think at this point, I'm much more interested in making my own art than printing for other people. But it was kind of interesting to see that transition where, printmaking, it's this process based. I wanted to be a technician. Again, I wanted that list of things to do, and I wanted to, someone to like leave me alone. I'll, do everything and get it all done. But then as I, again, kind of moved out of the school and academic life, realizing that I wanted to pursue, I had my own ideas and thoughts that I wanted to create imagery for. And that's where that's taken off here in Chicago. So, that's been exciting, and so far so good.
Yeah. That's interesting you should say that, because I feel like a lot of the people I talk to who have worked as collaborative printers or contract printers, they kind of went the other way, where they went to grad school and they were sort of, or undergrad, and they were asked to make their own work, and they did it kind of just to get by and get through it. And then once they were on the other side, it was this relief of, okay, I never have to make my own work again now. I can only focus on doing really what I love, which is this contract printing and the collaborative printing. And it's interesting that you went the other direction on it, where as you've left school, you've had that interest grow into your own work. I'm just wondering if you know kind of what accounts for that. Is it sort of not being in school gives you more of a freedom to sort of make what you want without that pressure to justify? Or is it just something where you are in your own life kind of more broadly?
Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely think definitely getting out of that academic, life and experience, which, I mean, I had a really very great education at Pratt, and, I made so many great connections there, and I'm still in contact with, a lot of my professors and everything. But I think that a lot of times I was kind of felt a bit intimidated by critiques, and, again, my work has been it's very illustrative, and I was feeling that at the time that a lot of the other students were making much, much more conceptual work. And so I kind of felt like, oh, I feel like I'm not doing this right. I mean, some of this, a lot of the things I was doing at the time, like I was making just to make, and, just get those basic ideas out, where I felt like some of the other students, it was a lot more conceptual, a lot more art speak. And I was like, I don't know if I'm really cut out for this. But then once I kind of had my own freedom to do what I wanted, I realized that, what I'm the more illustrative and, those graphic, and that was okay to do too. And that's really what I wanted to do all along. And, not so much all the conceptual stuff that everybody else was doing.
Yeah, I was just having a conversation last night with some other local artists here. And we were talking about this idea of conceptual art. And basically I was saying how, well, my background is in philosophy. So I did my undergrad, and it was actually with a focus in aesthetics. And so the actual engaging with the concepts or the abstract ideas of conceptual art, I just had the privilege of a training that I never felt that particularly intimidating, because I was like, oh, well, this feels like familiar water to me. But I still remain much more drawn to the tangible in work. So so I have this place where I'm saying, it's not that I don't understand it. It's not that I feel like I need to like it to be smart. I just don't, it just doesn't ring that bell in me. Like I just don't necessarily respond to it, because I guess this is sort of a very long-winded anecdote to bring it around to this idea of like conceptual art, particularly when it comes to printmaking, is something we don't see very often. Printmaking seems to be, in and of itself, more communicative, more, as you say, illustrative. And I've always wondered, a bit of a chicken and the egg kind of question with it, in the sense of, are people who are drawn to printmaking particularly interested in doing things a bit more tangible, or is there something about the medium that makes people want to be more narrative and figurative in the work? I don't know if you've thought about that one before, but
Yeah. I mean, especially because I've kind of transitioned into mainly working with woodcuts and screen prints. Again, those are two printmaking mediums that are made, that can be made for mass distribution and communicating and getting a message across. And I actually part-time work at, it's a design and illustration studio that has a screen printing shop. It's called Delicious Design League here in Chicago. And we do all handmade, hand-printed, screen-printed gig posters for movies, shows, packaging, design. And so, I mean, I've really fallen in love too with like printing the gig posters, and really, creating and printing art that's made for music and dance and theater. And so for me, that's all about imagery and getting information across. And so that's where I feel like I've really latched on to that. And I can see that coming through in my own work and inspiration, again, from working at the design studio and kind of, again, learning about color mixing and composition and getting to see a lot of different illustrators and designers making things. And although they're not the ones printing them, it gives me inspiration for my work in order, like, how to design things and, get ideas across on paper. And then we're making these designs come to life and, getting them out to all the shows and movies and concerts and everything. And so, yeah, that's also been very informative. And also it's taught me a lot more about being a technician as well with my own work. And so I give that a lot of credit. I haven't actually been working there for a minute now because of COVID and everything. And there aren't any gig posters to print since there aren't any shows or anything going on. But yeah, for the past like 2 or 3 years, I've been working over there. So that's been great too.
Yeah. What about at HoofPrint as well? Because that's more contract printing or collaborative printing that you do there?
Yeah, so HoofPrint's run by Liz and Gabe, and they're here in Chicago as well. They're actually the first two people that I really ever met in Chicago. I met them back in 2015. I was on a road trip cross country because I left Pratt, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't know where I wanted to go, but I kind of had a feeling that I wanted to leave New York. And so that fall in 2015, I went on a road trip, and I went to, I think it was like 25 or 26 states, and visited maybe like 34, 35 print shops. And again, I was looking for jobs. I was looking for art opportunities. I was looking to see if I could see myself in a certain city or art community. And, I had been on the road trip for it was probably about 40 something days before I got to Chicago. And then I just happened to Google Chicago printmaking, and HoofPrint Workshop was one of the first pages to come up. And I I just kind of sent them an email and I was like, hey, could I come check out your studio? And Liz and Gabe were like, yeah, sure. We're having an open house. Come on by. And honestly, I met them and we just kind of clicked, and I ended up staying here it was like 2.5 weeks when they were they were printing a big woodcut show. And again, yeah, they had invited artists to create these 40 by 60 woodcuts, and then they were doing all the printing for the artists. And they asked me if I wanted to make one, and I was like, yeah, sure. And that's kind of how it all started. And to be honest, I never left. I got here and I spent those 2.5 weeks here. I went back to New York for a job interview and decided I didn't want to be in New York anymore. And I came right back out, and that's when I started working at HoofPrint. So that was the first studio out here that I started working at. And yeah, they do everything: woodcut, litho, etching, screen printing. And yeah, they do anything from contract-based stuff where people will ask them, hey, can you print this etching for me, or print this litho, or can you help me make a litho? But they also do publishing where they will invite artists, painters, printmakers, sculptors to come in, and the artist comes in with the idea, and then Liz and Gabe make it happen. And so I've helped print editions for woodcuts, and they recently got a big auto press for screen printing. So we've been doing some stuff like that recently, printing some posters for some of the protests and everything going on out here in Chicago. And so that's been, really powerful. And yeah, that again, I give them a lot of credit for my start here in Chicago. And they really, took me in and inspired me to make art. And they've taught me a lot just by doing out here. And so I go over there too from time to time to help out, kind of like as an as needed basis. And they've got a beautiful studio down in McKinley Park. They got everything going on over there.
Definitely.
So they're really awesome. And I think you probably met them at SGC and stuff before. And because we usually travel to a lot of those conferences and art fairs together, just because we live 2 miles from each other. So and we're really good friends and coworkers. So we do a lot of traveling and stuff and work on projects. And again, Liz was the one that got me into ceramics, which is one of my newer ventures that I've been exploring. And it's been pretty difficult, but it's a lot of fun. So
yeah, definitely. Yeah. With HoofPrint, there are people who have been having on my list to have on the podcast for a while too, because they seem to have started a print studio in a major city in the States within recent memory that's thriving. And I feel like that is such the dream for so many people. And so I'd love to at one point talk to them about how did they go about doing that? Because I think that being able to build one's life around printmaking in this way is truly something that many of us aspire to do. And it's beautiful when you can see like people making it work.
Yeah. They are fully in it. That's their whole life. They live, breathe, eat printmaking. For a while, their first studio was pretty cool. It was at an old funeral home. And they lived in the funeral home on like the second floor, and then had the print shop on the first floor. And so that was when I first moved here. I actually lived in the funeral home with them for about 3 months. So that was kind of interesting. But they're killing it, and as you said, they're thriving. So it's really exciting. Yeah, it's really exciting to be a part of that, and they're just so inspiring, and to have such supportive friends out here and artists, and it's really cool.
And how haunted was the funeral home?
I never saw anything or heard anything, but people say that they have, and so I don't know. I can't say if it's haunted or not, but it might. It might be. It was definitely a very interesting space. And there were definitely some people too that would, at the time they were also a gallery, so people would come in off the street and they'd be a little bit nervous, and we'd be like, it's okay, like nothing, it's really not that weird, like come on in. But yeah, there definitely were some people that were a little creeped out by the fact that it was in a funeral home.
Yeah. So yeah, I feel like that's That sounds really fun, though. Like having that experience of moving to a new city and connecting with people and getting to live in a funeral home and living and breathing printmaking. It sounds like it's going to be a good chapter in your memoirs. Yeah.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, I feel like, yeah, that I just got thrown into it. And I mean, that was really good, though. I think, I really needed that because, again, I was feeling kind of lost, kind of undecisive about where I wanted to go, what I wanted to do, if I was really going to go all in and do this printmaking thing. And when I got here, that was really like convinced me that, look, these people are about my age, a little bit older, and they're doing the thing. And I was like, I want to be like that. I want to do that. How can I get there? And it's like, I kind of latched on, and luckily they let me latch on, and I just kind of never left, and just learning so much from them and being able to connect with, again, people that have similar interests and are doing something that I have a lot of interest and admiration for. And so just seeing that it's possible and you can make it work. And again, just having a place to make my art right out of college that had been a big thing that I had worried about, like, where am I going to make my art? Because again, you can make woodcuts at the kitchen table, but it's much easier and a lot better of having a studio. And again, I got access to the studio, and I was able to continue making my work and not take a big break from things so it wasn't so hard to get back into it after. I know sometimes it's hard if you don't have access to a studio or time. And yeah, I think that was the key, was that I just had to keep going, like not stop. And that's helped me kind of get to where I am now. So
Yeah, I know a lot of people can struggle with that, losing the momentum after college, and particularly after something like a BFA or an MFA show, where they've put so much energy into this final event, this ultimate expression of these years of work. And then if you can't find a place to continue to work, there's some people who are just say, well, and then I never printed again. It's just something really kind of dramatic like that. It can definitely happen if you can't keep up that effort, because it is a lot,
Yeah.
It is. I'd say, speaking of your own work, I'd love to chat a bit more about it specifically, because you use a lot of animals in your art. Animals as metaphor, I feel like, which is, of course, one of the tales as old as time in visual culture, and one that I just love. I went to graduate school with the, really pretty much only knowing I wanted to study animals and art. And that was basically all I knew. And it wasn't until I got to graduate school where they're like, that's not actually a topic. They're like, you have to get a little more specific than that. I was like, oh, okay, yeah. But it's something that I always love. I'm always drawn to images of animals. And I would love to hear your story of how they became a vehicle for you and why they come up sort of so regularly in your art.
Again, growing up, I had always had an interest in art and in science, and specifically in animal science. And I just found myself consistently drawing animals. I mean, ever since a very young age. And it just had always been a theme in my work. And again, I think, like, especially in college, I was trying to figure out why it was a theme and why I felt this need to create imagery of animals. And again, I got into reading. And in high school, we read like some of the Shakespearean tragedies and comedies, and I kind of didn't really understand it then, and I had no interest. But I came back to it later on, a few years later, and that's when I started getting really into Shakespeare's birds, and how the birds in a lot of his plays, again, were metaphors, or harbingers of death, or forsaken love and stuff like that, which I had no idea about years prior when I was reading the plays and everything. But I started making these woodcuts of Shakespearean birds, and the way that they had been described, or some of the instances that they had been used in his plays. I started kind of making illustrations of those, and it resulted in I had made this big, it was a cut paper, I guess you could say it was a mural, cut paper mural that had been my thesis show. And it was about the European starlings coming in and being an invasive species and how they had destroyed, the natural habitat and especially New York's birds. It was like bluebird and as well as the woodpecker. And because I had become interested in that in New York because I originally there was a man from Europe who wanted to introduce, I can't remember his name right now, but he wanted to introduce all the birds from Shakespeare's plays into the United States. But a lot of these birds are not native to the United States. So when he brought them over, some of them died off. They could not survive, and he let them go in Central Park, and they were like, what are we supposed to do here? But right. in particular, the European starling thrived. I mean, it just started, they just multiplied like crazy. And I mean, now you see them, they're out here in Chicago. I mean, they're everywhere. And yeah, they're an invasive species. They're a mean, like they're a nasty bird. But that's kind of, again, and so I made this whole mural about that. But I just find these animals, they can be, I use them as metaphors in my daily life, but also I think that they are, they can be used as vehicles that are, on a national, personal, global level that people can connect to. And, I feel like a lot of people feel sometimes more connected to a certain animal or than people sometimes. And I feel like that was my way of getting some of the positive and negative things about, ourself and our, human conduct and interactions. I've decided to express them through animals and animal interactions. And after the Shakespeare's birds, I got really into Aesop's fables, which again, these were stories, many that I had read as a younger child, but did not really, look that much more into it or think about it more on like a personal or metaphorical level. I kind of just took them as they were, the tortoise and the hare and everything. But as I started studying them, I realized that a lot of these themes and these stories that had been, written hundreds and hundreds of years ago, you're seeing history again repeat itself in interactions again on like from person to person as well as globally and nationally. And I think the times can change, but a lot of time our innate human nature stays the same. And just watching again, just as I said, history repeat itself and things that people were writing stories about hundreds and hundreds of years ago. Again, it's not the same story, but I think that there are similar outcomes or similar interactions, and that again, like animals have instinct and they have patterns. And again, humans I think are the same, whether or not we want to admit it. I think we kind of function in the same way, that there are certain things that we tend to lean towards doing and repeating, and whether they're good habits or bad habits. And I just have used some of that stuff that I've seen in real life and kind of applied it to my art, but instead of making figurative images of people, they're different animals and birds and all sorts of nature. And again, using flowers have been used as symbols and metaphors for emotions, all like love, hate, fear, all that kind of thing. And so combining animals with the fauna and flora, kind of, that's really where a lot of my inspiration comes from. And that's what I've been for the past few years. That's been my main focus. So
yeah, because there is such a tradition of people being willing to empathize with animals before other humans. And I'm always curious if that's why animals as metaphor, as I said, it just goes back so far, and not just even in visual culture, but in stories and fables, like you said, like Aesop's fables. And it reminds me of that classic cliche of people watching an action movie or some kind of drama, and there's people being blown up horribly all over the place, but everyone gets upset when the dog dies.
Yep.
Yep. And that there's something about if you tell a story and you're saying it's happening to people, you'll get less of a response sometimes than when it's happening to animals, which of course is truly ironic given how horribly we treat animals in actual life. But like that's
Right, exactly.
sort of another story altogether. But at least something about their placement in narrative, we love them in that, and it works really, really well. And I also love that tradition of using them to say things that maybe you wouldn't normally be able to say, in the sense of like, Mr. Tax Collector, this story is not about you. It's about a fox. Look, there's not even humans in it, this kind of thing as well. So I just, I love seeing that tradition still lives on, and that people like yourself are using it in these really beautiful, effective ways. I was also noticing that you've been doing sort of pairings of flowers and animals in some of the work as well. Like it looks like a scorpion and a peony maybe is one that I'm particularly having in mind. And so can you speak to that mixed symbolism, or that pairing of iconography, and why you're going about that and what you're achieving with it?
Last summer, I had a show, it was called Semi-Sweet, where again, it was pairing flowers with, frogs, the scorpion, snakes, kind of creatures that, I think that a lot of times people think of pests or, kind of gross or dirty. But it was comparing the two of them, and, I feel like it was kind of casting these creatures in a more positive light, and like maybe they're not so gross after all. I mean, and I just experimenting again with. It's interesting too to see people's reactions where, again, I think with the ceramics, where again there's like a toad or a rat on it, but but at the same time, something that they usually think is gross, they find beautiful, and sometimes I think they're surprised by it. They're like, wow, I really like that. I mean, and I think it's interesting to watch, their reactions. And again, kind of, I feel like a big part of my work, again, with the stories, and a lot of the stories that I depict or fables are, a lot of them are violent, or a lot of them are pretty negative, or have, outcomes where the animal does end up dying. But I'm kind of using the imagery, and I think the colors and composition to create images that are like first visual glance, they're very appealing, and you could say they're pretty or attractive, but then I think the more you read into it, there's that second layer where it's like, there's the fox and the rooster, or the wolf and the crane, and then you're like, what happens though to the rooster afterwards?
Yeah.
Or, what happens with this the crane that's sticking its beak into the the wolf's throat. And again, it's just having that. I like to draw people in with that first like visual, like that's attractive, that's pretty. But then, the more people look at it, the more layers they're able to peel back and see, there's a lot more than just a pretty picture there. There's a story being told. And again, I think the things that I've chosen to make art about, I think are important. And so for me, that's my way of kind of getting my foot in the door, and having people focus and look at things that maybe otherwise would be overlooked because they're not always nice, or they're not always pretty, but portraying them in a certain, and visually as, attractive, I think is able to draw more people in. And I've been able to connect with a lot of people over the, that imagery and stuff. So.
And you also are a pet owner yourself, is that correct?
I am. Yep.
You've got a Holland Lop, a little bird told me.
Yeah. I got his name is Blue. He's he's a lop-eared rabbit. So he's actually all black, and he's got two big floppy ears. He's very sweet. Again, I have I just feel a connection to rabbits and everything. So I've had a couple pet rabbits, and they show up a lot in my work too. And again, it was recently inspiration. He was inspiration, as well as the ceramics, to create a new relief ink color with speedball that I've been working on.
I wanted to ask you about that, because I think that I'm really curious about what goes into like developing it, and then even maybe some of the technical stuff. If you can answer that, if it's not proprietary, just
Yeah.
the actual, developing a new ink and a new color is really, really exciting.
So I think it started last winter where Speedball contacted me and they were talking about how they wanted to create this group called the Speedball Print Posse. And they asked if I wanted to be a part of it. And, Carlos Hernandez and Bill Fick were kind of leading the two leading artists, and then Martin Mazzora and Killjoy and just, Dylan Goldberger and a lot of other, I think there's about 15 of us. And part of the group was to, again, kind of, promote printmaking, and they had released their line of professional relief inks a couple years prior. And so they have had, the same, I think it was, the same 6-7 colors out for a while. And Bill Fick had helped them develop the super graphic black, and they wanted to continue that project by asking us to, come up with a color. It could be screen printing ink, relief ink. A couple people made their own paper colors. And so at first, I was really excited, but then I was like, oh my God, there's so many colors. How am I going to pick, just like one color? And, I thought about it for a while, and I was like, I gotta make something good. Like, what should I make? And I had just started at the time starting to do a lot of ceramics, and I was using the Speedball. It was like Speedball medium blue underglaze, and it fires as this pretty bright, vibrant blue. And I was, making these carvings that are very similar to my wood carvings on the clay. And I just wanted to connect my clay practice with my printmaking practice. And I was like, I'm going to create an ink color that is inspired by the color blue that the underglaze fires. And my plan is to create a body of work that, uses I'm going to have the ceramics and the Speedball underglaze, and then also create a series of prints that, reflect or pair with the ceramics that are printed in the Hop and Holland blue ink that I made with Speedball. So once I decided on the blue, I picked out a Pantone color that matched closest, and I sent it over to Speedball, and I told them about my idea, and they were really into it. And so then their chemist over there and the labs and everything made up some samples, and we went back and forth a little bit, and I was like, oh, maybe a little bit more white or a little bit more black there. And then they sent me a sample, and it was like a dead-on match to the ceramics that I was making. And I was like, okay, this is perfect. And then, from there, so they did most of they consulted me about colors and everything, but they were doing the actual chemistry and the color mixing behind it, and, getting the right measurements and everything to make that, same consistent color over and over and over again. So from there, once I approved the color, everyone who made inks and everything designed their own labels that would be printed on the cans. And so I, again, made a little bunny carving that is, again, inspired by my rabbit. And, another really hard part about this, I was like, oh, I got to come up with a name. And so the connection there as well is that, my rabbit, his name is Blue, and he's a Holland Lop. But it's also the color is inspired by Delft pottery from the Netherlands and from Holland. And so, again, a lot of my ceramics started out with me looking at the, Delftware. And when I actually went to Amsterdam a few years ago, I just loved Delft pottery. And so that kind of stuck with me when I started making ceramics. So, again, the color is kind of an ode to Delftware pottery in Holland, and then brought back into my pet rabbit, and he's a Holland Lop, and his name is Blue, and so it kind of all fell into place there.
Sounds like all the stars aligned.
Yeah, and so I was like, okay, once, it took a while to come up with and to, really, end up seeing the final color and everything, and but it felt great once I was able to kind of connect everything, and I felt good about it. And recently, Speedball, they ended up, they've canned all the inks and everything. So they sent me some inks, and it's awesome. So I'm super excited to be a part of that. And again, Speedball's been super supportive, and I've been working mainly with Kelly Braun over there, and she's great. And yeah, Speedball makes awesome stuff, and I'm just very honored that they, asked me to be a part of this project, because it was a lot of fun, and it's super cool. And I was able to put my love for rabbits on an ink can. So,
well,
so
I also have a very deep love for rabbits, and so Speedball relatively recently became like really the first sort of on-air sponsor of Pine Copper Lime. And one of the things that we were talking about when I was talking about with Kelly, and I was saying, yeah, like, this is great, and we're really excited for your support. So what are you excited about over at Speedball right now? And she's like, oh, our Print Posse inks, for sure. And I looked through and I saw one called Hop in Holland, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's like, I'm so glad this exists in the world. Yeah, because
yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I grew up with a Holland Lop as a pet, and they really are, like, people do not understand, I think, how much personality they have, and how much I would say, at least from the rabbits that I've lived with, that they're more like dogs than cats. And, in the sense that they're excited to see you. They want to greet you when they come home. They want to be around you. They don't have that aloofness of a cat, which of course is, one of the many reasons people love domestic cats. But it's, rabbits really have that social engagement. And I think because they're social creatures, they have that, they live in big communities in the wild, the way wild dogs or wild canines do. And so they definitely have opinions and want to be around you, and it's just great. And so it's wonderful that Blue, your Holland rabbit, can also inspire a great ink. Have you done an image of him in the Hop in Holland yet? An actual an editioned print?
I have not yet, but that is definitely on one of my many lists to do. He will definitely be making an appearance. But yeah, no, because as you said, they're super sweet, and when I get up in the morning, he starts running circles around my feet, and they definitely do have very strong personalities, and they're playful and fun and sweet, and I feel like it's like one of those pets a lot of people I don't think know a whole lot about, but again, they're common enough where I think that they make a good pet just as like a dog or a cat, and he's always been kind of my muse over here for my art, so it's been nice having him around, and he's super cute. So
they also have that added benefit of just being adorable 24/7, which is really nice.
The lop ears, just perfect.
The kind of the bounce that they do, when they're excited about something, they're pretty great pets. Everyone, go rescue a rabbit from your local shelter. You will definitely not regret it.
No, not at all.
With some of the time that we have left, I do want to make sure we get a chance to talk about your ceramic work a little bit, because it's really interesting in the sense that it's visually similar to your relief carving, and that, of course, the actual ways in which an image can be created, through a reductive process in ceramics has physical similarities to relief carving and printmaking. So I guess I'd love to hear about that connection, but also I feel like ceramics is the community that printmaking gets compared to the most. We'll say, oh, we're really great. We have a workshop setting. We have our conferences. We're this great community. And then every once in a while people are like, I don't know, maybe ceramics has that too. I'm not sure. Yeah. And so I want you to be, our mole on the inside of the ceramics world to answer the question, do they have as much fun as us?
That's a hard question. I think printmakers have a lot of fun, but the ceramics community here has been super welcoming. And again, like Liz from HoofPrint, she started getting into ceramics a couple years ago, and so that kind of one day she threw a cup and she was like, "Here, carve it," and I was like, "What? Wait, what?" And then I just kind of sat down and started learning how to use the tools and everything. And I was like, you know what, this is, again, it's a lot, but at least the carving process is a lot kind of like the woodcut carving process or lino cut. It's actually a bit easier because the clay is a lot softer. And so for me, it started to become kind of a therapeutic outlet. Again, I love carving wood and everything, but I had a show recently. And again, after the show, it was I felt like in a little bit of a post-show slump, and I was like, I don't know what to do. I'm kind of bored of making prints right now. Like I want to do something else, and ceramics was there, and I was like, all right, like I'm gonna give this a shot. And it just started off as me, just do something new to do and to work on and learn about. And it was just, I think I really needed that because I, again, had been doing the same thing for years. And it was just a much needed challenge. And again, I had just gotten so locked into that printmaking process. Again, just check off the list, like this and then that. And, I was just kind of getting a little bit lost in the process and not having as much fun with it. And I think ceramics kind of shook that up a bit. And it was just interesting for me to try to get, like, again, my woodcut imagery onto, a round object. And, it's just experimenting with, again, like the reductive process on clay. And I had taken one clay class in college, and that was about it. And I hadn't touched it since. So I really, knew nothing about clay. And I'm still learning so much. But, it's been like a little over a year now with just, again, making these functional objects. And I've found that people respond really well to them. And, they're also very tactile, like everything is carved. And even when you glaze it, like the imagery, I mean, you can run your fingers over it, the kind of like squiggly line work around everything. People are like, oh, it just like feels good to hold that in your hand and to like pick up and look at. And, again, seeing my art on a 3D object has been pretty cool and informative for me to learn more about my art practice and how, again, I can translate these 2D images and thoughts and, ideas onto a 3D, tactile form. So I've just been having a lot of fun with it. And I got a batch of about looks like 12 or so of new cups coming up. So I'm excited. Just, again, been experimenting with underglazes. And again, with the ceramics as well as printmaking, there's a lot of the unknown. I mean, you can go through the process, but there's always something that comes up that you weren't expecting. And I'm finding that to be the same way with ceramics where, something fires a little bit weird, or the glaze is a totally different color than you thought it was going to be, or just as far as like glaze application and the color changing and, spending 10 hours on something and then having it crack in the kiln, like having, just unexpected things where, I thought I'd be used to it with printmaking, but, but no, there's always something.
Yeah. And I think that's that moment of reveal too, pulling the paper back or opening the kiln. I had never thought of that before, but that it also has that drama, which
Definitely.
is such an emotionally satisfying aspect of the creation.
Yeah, I'll find myself getting a little nervous when I'm like, okay, it's ready to go pick it up, like just wondering what it looks like, did it come out okay? And as you said, like the big reveal, and sometimes, usually it's pretty good, but sometimes you're like, oh man, that's a bummer.
Yeah.
But it's just something that I'm definitely going to continue using in my practice. And, now I'm looking forward to using my new ink to, kind of almost have a conversation with, like, having my print work, have a conversation with my ceramic work and what that's going to look like. And so, for me, that's really exciting.
Excellent. Beautiful. Well, before we sort of wrap things up here, I'd love it if you could let us know anything on the horizon that you're looking forward to that people should be looking for. And then also, where can people find you and see your prints and see your ceramics and learn about your practice more? So
I did have some shows and fairs coming up this year, but they did all get canceled.
Yeah.
Or postponed. But it's not determined yet, but I believe sometime in either summer or fall 2021, I will be having a show at the Beverly Arts Center here in Chicago. So I'm really looking forward to that. And yeah, but hopefully some of this stuff is going to get rescheduled. I just got to keep making, and it'll get out there. But yeah, so the show at the Beverly Arts Center, and then hopefully I'll be going to SGC next spring as well, if that's going to happen this year or next year. And then as far as social media, I'm on Instagram as Anna Hasseltine, just my full name. If you search me, a little goldfish comes up. And my website is annahasseltine.com. And yeah, there's more, my bio's on there, and some older ceramic and print work, and kind of you can see how like the progression from my older work to some of my newer work. And so that's all up there. And of course on Instagram I post pretty frequently, and that's probably the best place to see my most recent ceramics and prints and everything. And that's where I post the most. So check out
Beautiful.
Instagram.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, I'll put links in the show notes to all of that. And yes, thank you for joining me this evening.
Yeah, thank you so much.
It was just great to talk prints and animals, and I'll be in touch as we move forward to release this. But it's really been great to get to know you a bit more, and I hope we can connect, probably SGC 2021, fingers crossed.
I hope so.
Things will be a little less chaotic by then. And
yes,
that would be really great. So thank you, Anna.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for inviting me to be on the podcast, and it was great speaking with you. And yeah, I'm really glad we could talk about all this good stuff.
Excellent. Thanks again. I'll be in touch.
All right, sounds good. Thank you again.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Well, that's our show for this week. Join me again next week when my guest will be Latoya Hobbs. Latoya is a professor at the Maryland Institute College of Art, whose portraits explore the intersections of race, beauty, and identity concerning women of African descent. You won't want to miss it. This episode, like all episodes, was written and produced by me, Miranda Metcalf, with editing help from Timothy Pauschak and music by Joshua Weber. I'll see you next week.